In wartime turmoil, nothing hurts like an inward strike. Russia has made fresh military mistakes, and the latest friendly fire event that downed one of its jets may be Putin's greatest fear. When an army turns on itself, how does it cope? Russian military setbacks and tactical misfires. Russian plane downs Russian plane. Putin probably didn't expect that when he launched his 2022 three-day military incursion into Ukraine. However, the Russian military is now a global joke. A week after a Russian nuclear missile burst into the silo, a Russian jet shoots down its plane in friendly fire. The plane crashed on Ukrainian territory, making matters worse. Thus, Ukrainian and Western forces are likely pleased to learn about Russia's aircraft technology advancements. Another Russian plane crashed in Donetsk. Early reports said the Russian Su-25 ground attack plane was shot down. The flight crashed in Ukraine-controlled territory. Later film showed another friendly fire incident destroying it. The Ukrainian Telegram channel posted a video of the attack on the aircraft, noting that the plane caught up with the second one had two jet engines and the first one landed on one with full tanks. Technological failures in Russian military equipment. Additionally, it wasn't a Su-25. In the next tweet, further angles of the attack and plane crash are shown. Over time, more information about the downed aircraft surfaced. The Sukhoi S-70 was a Russian heavy-salt unmanned combat aerial vehicle. The fifth-generation Sukhoi Su-57 fighter jet may be used in its development. Its stealth and warfare capabilities are optimized by its 20-meter wingspan and two internal armament bays that can carry 2,000 kilos of guided and unguided missiles. Kyiv Post reported that the Russian fighter shot down Russia's most advanced drone, which costs $15 million each. Another Russian military misstep. Russia was the first country with nukes invaded by a non-nuke nation. Putin was the first sitting president to be wanted for arrest. Now this. Ukraine's equal force struggle and Western hesitation. Russia took Boholdar, another Ukrainian town. But at what cost? Russian elite units lost more in this year-long war for this town than in 10 years in Chechnya. The main reason Ukrainians have to give up their positions is because they can't employ Russian weapons. That's because the West hasn't allowed Ukraine to strike within Russia, including Russian military bases and airfields used to attack Ukraine and Ukrainian positions. The identical explanation from President Zelensky. Why do we keep utilizing long-range weapons? Russia's use of such weapons cannot be stopped without it. They destroy everything, even our soldiers' positions. We must defend their lives because they matter more than buildings. Putin's bluff and nuclear threats. Weakness. Ukrainian citizens. As mentioned at the start of the film, the Russian military is ridiculous. Russia is losing this fight, but nukes help. No nukes, only nuke warnings. That has prevented the West from allowing Ukraine to destabilize Russia, attack military bases, and bomb airfields. I think two things. The Russians see that nuclear hyperbole works. As mentioned, the Biden administration is hesitant to launch long-range missiles out of concern for Russian retribution. Why not keep it up if it intimidates your opponents and makes them retreat? All Russian senior authorities, including Lavrov, the foreign minister at the UN General Assembly last week, are talking about nuclear weapons. They believe they have the West behind them. However, a deeper look shows how weak Putin is. Putin says Russia has the second largest and strongest military in the world, and if they can't beat Ukraine without crying about nukes, they can bomb the globe. It shows Putin's and Russia's military weakness. Putin has a long leadership path. I think the last thing he wants to recognize is that using nuclear weapons to preserve his country is a major weakness and failure. He should add, "We have a powerful conventional army and will achieve whatever we want with our conventional forces." His failure to do so in Ukraine has made him reconsider his last resort. However, they're dubbed weapons of last resort for good reason. I don't think Putin will utilize his last resort since you never know the consequences. Despite his certainty, I would have assumed that using nuclear weapons in Ukraine would have dire consequences for Russia. This doesn't mean a nuclear battle between the West and Russia. The battle between Russia and Ukraine, backed by this U.S.-led coalition, would change and become more dangerous. I doubt Putin would consider that. Global reactions to Russia's nuclear test failure. We previously covered how Russia's nuclear missile exploded in its silo before launch. Let's start that portion now. Russian nuclear missile explodes within Russia. Russia is an endless gift for comedians. Russia was the first nation with nukes to be invaded. Putin became the first Russian leader to lose territory since WW2. In Russia, nuclear missiles are bursting. It exploded at the launch site test site. This was no ordinary missile test by Russia, making it even more absurd. A display of force. It was a show of force they were excited about. Sergei Lavrov warned Sky News that Russia's nukes are ready in a huge interview. This test was meant to convince the world, the West, and NATO that Russia is not afraid to use its nukes. Sadly, the rocket never launched. The photos and videos from the region are hilarious. Today's video covers all that and more. A phony press conference with Putin answering one question was recently held. What would Russia do if NATO allowed Ukraine to attack Russia with Western weapons? At least last week, there was a lot of reporting that NATO, particularly the US, was leaning toward allowing Ukraine to strike within Russia using Western weapons. Putin cannot afford this in a war that's going so poorly for Russia. He held a press conference to warn NATO that granting permission would put NATO at war with Russia. Russia is not frightened to use its nukes. I guess after this interview, the world has a new red line, Russia's 100th in this conflict. Many specialists and brighter people than me saw this for what it was. Russia was bluffing to prevent the West from aiding Ukraine. Contact Ben Hodges directly. It has no benefit for them, thus they won't use it. Russia benefits whenever it fires a nuclear weapon, regardless of the battlefield. Only worsens the situation. Their only benefit from nuclear weapons is the possibility that they would use one, because the U.S. and several allies have been slow to assist Ukraine beat Russia. People didn't take it seriously, thus, Russia raised the stakes, pushed their bluff further. First, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said this in a telegraph. The issue is that Medvedev is ignored. The proof is here. U.S. Department of State comment after Medvedev's statement. Russia had to use huge guns. They were planning to test a nuclear missile to prove Russia can do what it says. Russia can use nukes if the West ignores it. The aim was for Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, to give a large address warning to the West and NATO. Russia will perform a massive test after the conference to show its seriousness to anyone who doubts it. It didn't go as planned. First, let's review Sergei Lavrov's remark, and then the test's results. Russia's doctrine is known. The nuclear weapons framework is questioned every time red lines are crossed. Red lines are discussed in hopes that smart decision-makers will hear our opinions and statements. Saying we'll press the red button if you don't comply tomorrow is ridiculous. I believe the decision-makers understand our intent. Nobody wants nuclear war. We repeated this. I promise that our armaments will have dire consequences for the Ukrainian regime's masters. Weapons are ready and vigilant. After this, the new Russian missile would be tested to show off its might. Satan II, or RS-28 Sarmat, was the missile, not a Soviet-era missile, thus it's not old. This relatively new Russian weapon was unveiled in March 2018 and tested in April 2022, just after the invasion. As we know, Russia's front line is losing all Soviet-style weapons. Russia boasts of this new missile as a defense industrial breakthrough. You'll find the failure was huge. According to the tweet on your screen, Russia tested an RS-28 Sarmat ballistic missile. However, the test failed before beginning. A missile exploded on the ground during fueling, destroying the silo and most of the launch site. Russian corruption and Western threats. The silo is mostly demolished, but I'll show you the before and after soon. However, some may wonder how a missile destroyed the testing location before taking the launch. Because the missile has enough fuel to travel 18,000 kilometers, 11,000 miles. All that fuel went boom when things went wrong. The before and after photos of the launch site show that it was destroyed by an explosion. Satellite maps and photos are essential, since Russia will never admit this went wrong. Open source intelligence let us know this went badly wrong. Important note before continuing: no nuclear warhead is attached to these missile tests because they're tests, so they have a fake warhead for data collection. However, Peter Zihan makes a solid point. We already know Russia's Soviet weaponry is deteriorating. We know this because Ukrainian forces meticulously inspected Russian weapons taken from the battlefield at the start of the war to gain an advantage. Maybe they should upgrade their gear to give Russians a taste of their own medicine. The Ukrainians rapidly discovered that most Russian weapons were obsolete and unreliable after a comprehensive evaluation. These weapons were so terrible that the Ukrainians termed them ineffectual and antiquated compared to Western armaments. Additionally, this missile was not Soviet era. First tested in April 2022, this missile was new. Unfortunately, that was its last successful test flight. Since then, the rocket failed 4 times. Maybe we might assume that the Russian nuclear arsenal may be as weak as the rest of the military. Nuclear weapons require a lot of upkeep to stay ready. Corruption led to Chinese missiles being packed with water instead of gasoline because soldiers were removing fuel and selling it for profit. Russian corruption hasn't improved. Russian corruption enabled the Kursk invasion. I think the Russian government spent hundreds of millions of dollars fortifying the border. Still, when Ukrainian forces crossed, Putin realized that the person in charge just pocketed the money and done a terrible job, allowing Ukraine to invade Russia. Despite this, Russia will continue to bluff. Last week, a senior Putin advisor told Times Radio that if Ukraine wins authorization to fire UK-made Storm Shadow missiles inside Russia, Putin will attack Britain. It may be hard to believe, but listen. Last, it would be an attack on British land, but it would depend on Great Britain. From the start, I predict the British embassy will close, the Russian embassy will close in Britain, and some British drones and military planes will crash. Because these British missiles will be used from F-16s based in Romania and Poland, the Russian army may have to strike those F-16s. They won't simply attack Britain. Since Russia's operation in Ukraine is working, they'll strike Poland and Romania. However, Michael Clark's response was brilliant, reminding Russia that Britain possesses nuclear weapons. Thanks for watching our videos. We strive to provide timely and appealing information. Please comment on your ideas below. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Goodbye and see you.